All right, coming off that big finish in 2014, that romp over UCLA by a couple touchdowns, a top 10 Bruin team, and then, of course, demoralizing Maryland in the bowl game. Stanford looking to field a better than five-loss team coming up in 2015, but there's much work to do, and we will review what's at hand with Don King after Stanford just finished off its spring practices with its spring game. Don King joins us from Last Word on Sports. Hey, Don, how are you?
I'm great. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. So we had you on, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, just prior to spring practice, and at that point, you were much concerned about the defensive line. And based on the performance yesterday, you would still have to be concerned just based on the numbers and the injuries involved. But the guys that were out there, they have progressed a ton.
There is no denying this. I got to tell you, the two guys, Harrison Phillips was pressed into service last year in his true freshman year and played okay. But he's bulked up by a good 30, 35 pounds now. A lot of good eating, a lot of strength work in Shannon Turley's sports performance program. And Solomon Thomas, another second-year guy this fall, has also similarly bulked up a ton. He was the highly touted five-star recruit out of Texas, who it figures to be a terror in another year or two. But he and Phillips were phenomenal yesterday during the scrimmage. And as you mentioned, they've gotten a ton of work because it's pretty much been just the two of them and maybe one or two other bodies who've been available to play D-line, all spring. So I think they struggled early in the spring session. Got tired, got worn out, had to play pretty much every snap due to injuries and so forth. Some reinforcements are coming, which is incredibly encouraging, but I'll tell you, these guys answered the bell yesterday, and they both looked terrific. Thomas in particular, given that we had seen so little of him, really gave the quarterbacks some trouble, and collapsing the pocket and getting into the backfield. He looked good. And one other note, Luke Kamatule, the tight end convert, also had a huge play, just smothering Barry J. Sanders in the backfield on one of the running plays. So he's coming along nicely in his progression to become a defensive stalwart as well on the defensive end. So the line players who are available look good. Aziz Shatu is still injured. Expects to be 100% for fall camp. Did not really participate meaningfully in the spring. And Brennan Scarlett is going to come over as a graduate transfer who can play immediately from Cal Berkeley, of all places, but he'll join his younger brother who enters the Stanford program this summer. So the D-line will be bolstered a little bit with some reinforcements, but the guys who were available to play yesterday played really well, and it was very encouraging.
So if you're going to have adversity, this is the time to have that type of adversity and get healed up for August and then into September. So maybe a blessing in disguise that you find out that a few guys can play that may not have seen the field or gotten those first-team reps against the first-team offense. So that's good to see. Linebackers have been amazing at Stanford. We could run down a list of all-conference and some All-Americans over the past 5 to 6 to 7 years, the secondary as well. Let's run down what you've got right now in trying to replace what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll start with the linebackers. First of all, Blake Martinez comes back in the middle. He was a full-time starter last season. He was pretty much the only starter from last year who saw significant action yesterday in the spring game due to a couple of injuries. And, of course, attrition. And you're going to see a whole bunch of players off last year's roster get their names called in about 3 weeks here in Chicago in the NFL draft, and they'll be playing on Sundays somewhere in the fall. But Martinez looked great again yesterday. He's going to be the anchor on the inside, leader of the defense, so he'll assume that mantle. It certainly looks like, and talent-wise, he's certainly up to the challenge, and was actually an honorable mention all-conference performer last year. So, not too shabby on the talent side either, but his knowledge of the defense and leadership apparently in the locker room and behind the scenes is commendable, and thrilled to have him step forward and kind of become that anchor in the second level. He's going to be joined by some guys that you've seen flashes from. Peter Kalambayi is back. He got some action last year in his redshirt freshman season, was conference defensive player of the week 1 week, had a huge game. and has shown flashes throughout. But it's difficult with some of the guys he was playing behind to get the kind of snaps. He looked good yesterday. He's a great athlete. Has the speed to get sideline to sideline. He's going to do some damage for this year's team too. Joey Alfieri, who was a very highly recruited linebacker from high school, had an injury his senior year and spent his freshman year last year redshirting, building strength, completely rehabbing. He looked completely healthy yesterday, flying around out there. I think he's going to be a good, solid contributor as well. Nor Davis got to play it quite a bit last year toward the end, particularly in the bowl game, and played quite well. He looked good and solid and will contribute. Kevin Anderson did not play in the game due to injury, but he's probably the most known quantity other than Martinez amongst the linebacking core. We'll welcome him back for fall camp. He should be 100% and good to go for the season. So a lot of turnover, going to be a lot of new faces, but there's a lot of new talent as well amongst the linebacking core. I think that's going to be just fine this coming season as well.
And the secondary as well, Don, if you can dive into that and run down the secondary and what we expect to see this fall.
Yeah, secondary makes me nervous. A lot of turnover. Hard to lose a Jordan Richards to anchor the secondary. Guy's a stud and a 3-year starter, and he's one of the aforementioned guys headed to the NFL, I assume. You just, from a measurables and from a production standpoint, I don't see how he doesn't, get drafted and make a team this fall. So there's going to be a whole bunch of new faces back there, and one thing that we're going to have to wait and see, Zach Hoffpower, who was pretty well a starter last year in the secondary, played that nickel role a ton and did some other things, a very versatile performer, but he's also a star on the baseball team, and if he gets drafted high enough, he may be headed off to Major League Baseball. So we're gonna have to see how that plays out. Would love to have him back to help out in the secondary, but he may or may not be available. Now that said, all the other guys, there are a ton of young talent. The recruiting has been stellar in the defensive backfield, and of course with assistant coach Dwayne Akina coming over from Texas, he's kind of known as the DB whisperer, and has put a ton of guys in the NFL, and he knows what he's doing, and is helping to mold the next generation of Stanford defensive backs, and there's a lot of talent and some speed back there and guys ready to step up. So a couple of offensive converts, Dallas Lloyd and Cody Whitfield, figure to perhaps form the starting safety tandem, particularly if Hoffpower does not come back. Those two guys both played well yesterday. Whitfield had a great pass breakup where he flashed some of his wide receiver skills and almost came down with the ball, and Lloyd got the one interception during the scrimmage yesterday on a tipped pass. So the two of them have been playing solidly and have earned praise from both Shaw and Akina throughout spring ball. They've been surprises and seem to now have completely mastered the defensive playbook. Some young standouts. Brandon Simmons played well yesterday. He looked good. Terrence Alexander got some time last year in his true freshman year, was kind of in the DB rotation. He'll be a prominent player this fall. Figures to compete at one of the cornerback spots as a potential starter opposite Ronnie Harris, who's been injured this spring and did not play yesterday. And I thought the play of the game came from young Elijah Holder, who got a strip fumble and recovery on a fantastic play coming up from behind Austin Hooper. Ran him down after a long reception on a dart from Kevin Hogan, and just took the ball from him and fell down to recover the fumble. It was a fantastic instinctual play. Saw a lot of flashes, a lot of good things from the defensive backfield. They played quick, they played fearlessly. So there's a lot of talent. There's just a lot of inexperience. How quickly they come together, I think, is going to have a lot to say about what kind of season Stanford has this year.
So, Don, I usually take us from offense to defense, or in this case, defense to offense, but let's make a pit stop, special teams. David Shaw did mention after the game, sure, the defense dominated, looked extremely good, as mentioned. 7 points given up, though. 3 missed field goals, so there could have been more points on the board. And the punting wasn't the best. So run down the special teams for us.
I think you just did. It wasn't good. It's incredibly, as a fan of Stanford football and as an alum and somebody who's been following things closely, there have been some special teams heartbreaks over the past few years. There have also been some shining moments. There was nothing about yesterday's special teams performance that was confidence inspiring. It was really not good. You mentioned Conrad Ukaprina missed 3 field goals, did not look particularly good on any of the strokes, and apparently he's been kicking well through camp. But when we got to see it, it was awful. Did not look good at all. Nor did the punting. Nor did the punting look solid. Alex Robinson got a shot, first chance to punt, kind of in relief of Ben Ryan, who's graduated and moves on. And he shanked the first one out of bounds. Just didn't look strong at all. So the door is wide open now. Now, fortunately, and one of the things that's been a bit problematic, there have been some challenges getting folks, recruits into that area through the admissions process in the past few years. But this year, there are a couple of guys coming in, kind of a preferred walk-on named Charlie Beal is going to be entering this summer for fall camp, and Jake Bailey, a scholarship athlete who can either kick or punt. He's unlikely to do both, but I understand he's a decent athlete and also started at cornerback on his high school team. He figures to challenge for most likely that starting place kicking role, which is it's vital in today's college game. You've got to have somebody you can count on. The kid is apparently quite athletic, has a good leg. He figures to be in the mix, and between he and Ukrapina, hopefully one of them can get it together and be solid and dependable throughout the fall. But what we saw yesterday was just, in a word, not good.
All right, Don King joins us from Last Word on Sports. Let's talk about the offense, where the tight end position is always in vogue in the passing game at Stanford. Austin Hooper caught for 103 yards, more than half of what Kevin Hogan produced in the passing game. So let's start there.
Yeah, he looked great, and he's a convert for this coming season, to that F tight end position. So the one that we previously saw Zach Ertz in and play so well for so many years on the farm before moving on to the NFL and lighting it up with the Philadelphia Eagles. He looked terrific. He ran that seam route extremely well, showed soft hands and a strong ability to pull in the ball even when in a crowd. So no issues there. He looked really good. Cotton and Tabuada also had their moments at the tight end position. They looked terrific, and the future looks bright at the recently dubbed tight end U. As 2 of the last 3 years, Stanford now has gotten the top-ranked tight end in the nation to commit, including one that just came in a couple of days ago, where Stanford beat out Alabama for a touted tight end who's due to start to come in 2016. So, future looks bright. Current looks pretty good too. The tight end position was solid. Staying with the receivers for just a second, the wideouts were a little bit lacking yesterday due to injury. So a couple of starters did not get any snaps yesterday at all. More precautionary than anything in Devon Cajuste case. He pulled a hamstring in practice earlier in the week and did not play. He'll certainly be 100% and critical this fall. And Francis Owusu did not play yesterday either. So, the wideouts were a little thin. The tight ends kind of picked up the slack yesterday and got a lot of the action, as well as some good screen action to Barry J. Sanders and some swing passes to Christian McCaffrey.
Now, Andrus Peat is gaining rave reviews in his preparations for the NFL draft. If anything, Don, we expect out of Stanford mauling people in the running game. Are we going to see that type of offensive front this fall?
Yes, you will. The first team offensive line looked really good yesterday. Good on pass protection, good and solid in the running game as well. I'm a little concerned about the backups, acknowledging that there were a couple of guys held out who had some injury issues who figure to be in the mix for playing time, if not to start this fall. But the first team unit that was put together yesterday looked solid. The second team unit did not look that great at all. So some coordination issues, but I think there's a little bit of a drop off, and some guys who just are going to need some more work to perhaps get a little stronger, get a little tougher. Deal with the those defensive schemes and speed rushers coming from the outside linebacker positions. And to be clear, there are two different ways to see it. I think some of the second team defenders looked really good yesterday, so that's part of what plays into it. But certainly, we would expect a little more depth and a little more consistency from the offensive line. But from what I could see, the first unit O-line actually looked pretty good.
All right, Don, you gave me fair warning on Christian McCaffrey. You said you got to watch this kid play, and I did a couple times last year, and especially down the stretch and in the bowl game, start to finish. And wow, he can go to 0 to 50 in a heartbeat. So he was displaying his wares again on Saturday.
Yeah, C-Mac, as they've taken to calling him, was, in my mind, the best player on either side of the ball in yesterday's scrimmage. He's electric. He's really an exciting player to watch. He's fast. You can tell he's stronger. He's packed on some muscle. Does not look like he's sacrificed an iota of speed in exchange for that. He got the first snap in yesterday's scrimmage, and I think you might well see him be kind of the starting running back. I don't know that it's going to be a Toby Gerhart, Stephon Taylor type of bell cow situation even yet, but you can reasonably expect to see Christian McCaffrey get a far greater share of the load this season than he did last year. Ramon Wright looks solid, and I think he'll still be the goal line kind of guy. Barry J. Sanders still does Barry J. Sanders stuff and shows just a little bit of his dad's wiggle and some of that flash, particularly in the passing game coming out of the backfield. But McCaffrey looks like the guy who can do it all. And the one thing that was hard to evaluate yesterday was his ability to adapt and deal with pass protection, which is a big deal always for Stanford running backs. But given a year in the system, I'm confident that he will have picked up all of that, and the extra bulk will help him be able to stick his nose in there and stop an oncoming blitzer if necessary. But the kid is just too electric to not get on the field and get him his touches. So I think you can expect him to get a bunch of them, maybe as much as half of all of the work at the running back position this year. And I'll tell you, he looks like an all-conference future All-American type of performer. There's just nothing not to like about the kid's game. And yeah, the one thing you can't coach is speed, and he's got plenty of it.
Yeah, and there's so much speed in today's game that everybody has burners to a certain extent, but there's just something special about a guy like him that seems like he can get to that speed so quickly that it just makes all the difference in the world. That he can make that just that one or two steps and he's at full speed, and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, his first touch in the first game last season was a 40-yard touchdown, and there aren't a whole lot of kids in Division I football who can say something like that, and he showed that flash all year, and his average per touch was in the 10-yard neighborhood. You can't keep that off the field. He's a threat to go the distance pretty much every time the ball hits his hand. So I expect him to be a big deal this year, and expect him to have a terrific season. He's got superstar written all over him.
All right, good stuff from Don King. Last word on sports, getting us all set for Stanford football in the fall. I believe I'm all ready with the personnel breakdown, Don. You got me all set, so I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome, Mark. Thanks. Happy spring to you. We'll talk to you again soon.